Hello, the Fantasmagorium show is proud to present Ghouls, Ghosts, and Goblins, a Universal Horror Monsters retrospective. I'm Kat, joined by Scotty, and Steve is invisible as usual.
Delightful. So this is the Invisible Man show.
Yes.
When did you first see it?
Probably 7 years ago when I got the Blu-ray.
Yeah. When I got this Monster Madness, which I'm so happy about, and I'll show it off anytime I can. When I got this Blu-ray box set, this is the only movie that the first movie that I watched. So far, going through the Universal Monster movies has been entirely with you. But the one that I wanted to watch the most was The Invisible Man. What year was this released?
1933.
And I was like, how are they going to make a guy invisible in 1933? And they do it.
Yeah.
Like, these are some of the best early movie special effects that I've ever seen.
Yeah, they're very good. With the extra exposures on the camera, and sometimes you could see the outline of him for certain shots, like he's taking the bandages off his head, so you get a sense of how they did it. But it's very impressive for that time period,
for that era.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. And also, everyone knows I have an affection towards Claude Rains. But I think that his performance, especially considering that most of it is bandaged and, flailing in a suit, I think he does great. I think that the supporting cast is amazing in terms of expressing their terror towards what they do not understand.
Yes. And he is the deadliest of the Universal monsters.
Because he's brilliant.
Well, because he's psychotic.
That too. Well, it's like, okay, so Ernesto yesterday was saying, he was talking about the Man with 1,000 Faces, Lon Chaney, being a precursor to Clayface. And I think that this is an example of some of the best comic book villains as being people who are not there. They vanish.
Yeah, he's it's that and the fact that this guy murders over 100 people in this movie.
I love murder in my horror movies.
So he is pretty vicious.
Yes.
And he's just frustrated and just like at the brim of like like those little cartoons where their face is getting redder and redder, and it's just he's out of his boiling point throughout the whole movie.
Well, and in the same way that he sort of had that seething rage, and I mean Claude Rains, the performance, he had that in Phantom of the Opera, but in this one, it feels more desperate. It's amazing. So, Kat, run us through the plot. Oh, wait, before we do that, I know the only reason people are here is to hear Kat go through the plot. But I do want to say hello to Ash D. Ash D in the chat says, to be honest, I haven't seen the original, but I have seen the remakes. We'll get to those. Hollow Man and The Invisible Man that came out about a year or so ago. I've heard that The Invisible Man with Peggy is good, but I haven't seen it.
Almost 5 years ago now for that one.
Oh, wow.
And then Hollow Man, that was 2000, I think.
But hello, Ash. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here. Fred says, I think that makes the original Invisible Man movie such a very interesting is the practical effects that were used in the movie, because now with CGI, It's easy to make things by computer. Agreed. Totes. But that's also like.
Well, that's also some camera effects with the exposure and things that they're toying around and layering it to, layering the plates on top of each other, kind of like animation to make that work.
Yes. Well, and also, like, what was it? I'm reminded because I heard about how these special effects were made, and it reminds me of blue screen, green screen, but it also reminds me of, and this is so out of left field, but remember in Superman how they made the Kryptonians like cloaks glow?
No, I don't remember how they did it.
Well, so when you go to a movie theater and they have a screen, it's a special kind of fabric that reflects things very, very well. And that's what they made the Superman Kryptonian cloaks out of, so that they would reflect light incredibly. And in the original, or this, I think it's the original, Invisible Man, they did sort of the same thing to obfuscate when Claude, what's his name? I forget his name.
Jack Griffin?
When Jack takes the bandages off, it is like it's in camera.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible.
And I like how
I think this is the first, this is the Terminator 2 of its era.
And I like how when he first starts taking the bandage off on the top of his head, the two tufts of hair sprint up like horns.
Yeah.
Like devil horns. Because he's the plot is actually pretty simple. One of the simplest plots of any of the Universal horror films. That this stranger bandaged up walks over to the English countryside and he books a room in a sitting room at a what do you call it? Like an inn.
Above a tavern?
Yeah, like above a tavern and an inn, like a haberdashery or something. I suppose it would be something like that. And they don't know. All the people are kind of suspicious because they're really nosy and probably really bored because not much goes on over there. They think he might be a burn victim and he get injured in the war. Like, oh, what's going on? And so it's not really until the next day when the lady brings up the lunch tray, because he's been very specific how he doesn't want to be disturbed. He's got his experiments set up, and she goes to deliver lunch, and he's really upset. She's like, "Well, lunch is at 1:00," and he gets annoyed. He's like, "Fine, just set it down. Don't touch anything." And she leaves, but realizes she forgot the mustard, so the maid runs it back upstairs, and he just freaks out, and she just screams and flees and runs downstairs. And this actress is just completely there for comic relief. She works at the tavern. She's completely over the top, deliberately, and everything. There was really no reason for her to scream because he didn't really take his bandages off or do anything. She just saw that he had his chemistry set up there, and he just
he's kind of a dick.
Right, but the level of reaction from her is so over the top.
True.
And so she runs downstairs and gets fed up because eventually this guy's not been paying his rent, and she wants her husband, I presume, the other barkeep, to kick him out. And he tries to go up there. He's like, oh, okay, well, we got to go now. And the Invisible Man just gets annoyed by him and kicks him out aggressively. So they call the cops because she's now even more hysterical than she was before at her husband having fallen down the stairs. So the cops and the others show up and go in there, and they get into like a confrontation where he's very fed up. And he's like, all I've told you people is I want to be left alone. And that's when he takes off the bandages and reveals that he's invisible, and they have this silly chase sequence around the room where you have these really dumb cops literally chasing him around a table like in a cartoon. It's like, you see his torso, his shirt still, he's running. Just turn around, have one guy turn around. You got him, but they don't. I
don't know. If I were in that situation, I don't know if I would touch the Invisible Man.
Yeah, and he tries to throttle one of the cops, and they all get thrown out of the room, and they're like, "Oh, we need to, call for backup." The Invisible Man goes outside and starts tampering with people's stuff in the village, like grabbing this guy's bike and pushing it down the street, knocking over this woman's little carousel or little pram with looked like it just had blankets in it as opposed to a baby. And he's just wreaking random havoc around the town. And these reports make it back to London, and they're like, oh, these people must be crazy. There must be some type of, there's something in the water. Is kind of the consensus of the city folk, that they're crazy enough to believe that there's an invisible man running around, and this alerts Jack's friend Paul Kemp.
Who was his lab assistant? He was an accessory.
Yes, and so Kemp is suspicious because Jack has been missing for a while. So he consults his colleague, another doctor, saying, Jack's been gone. What's been up? He's like, well, he was working in here late recently. He didn't want me to see what he was doing. He was packing stuff up. Then they investigate further and find out that he was using a specific drug, which Kemp had never heard of. And apparently it alters your mind and makes you a bit, more dangerous. And they can't figure what he was trying to do. But they kind of get a sense of it because Kemp was alerted when he heard that, oh, there's an invisible man running around in this, quaint country village or whatnot. We're also introduced to Jack's girlfriend. What's her name? I always forget her name.
Let's say Katie.
Her name, played by Gloria Stewart, the lady from Titanic.
I know, she's so breathtaking. I forget her name. You're right. I should know.
Oh, Cora, I think it was. Here, I got it right here. Here we go. Her name was Flora. That's right, Flora Cranley. And the reason it's hard to remember her name is because this is literally a pointless character in the movie. She's there for the sake of having a female love interest. She doesn't really get to do anything or change the story. She's just kind of there. She's stressed because she doesn't know where Jack is, and she's worried and wants to find him. Her dad's trying to calm her down. It's okay. And the room she's in is or the house that they're in is huge. This room is massive, shaped almost like a horseshoe where you walk around the side of these two huge bay windows. So they got money. Clearly they've got they're kept a lot of money. That night, Kemp meets Jack because Jack comes back to his place and greets him as the Invisible Man. And he's like, oh, yes. And he tells him about how these people would never leave him alone. And he had to run away to figure out how to reverse the serum. And that you take this stuff for 30 days. He shows it to him and you'll become invisible. But then he starts rambling about how we could take over the world. And we could start with a few murders here and there. Important people and little people alike. So that way that we're not discriminating. And Kemp is just listening to him like this is just completely insane. And then Jack's like, well, you better go get a good night's rest because we have a lot of work to do in the morning with our plotting. And Kemp is kind of freaking out about it. He's or before he says you get a night's sleep, we got to go back and get my books from the tavern. So okay, so Kemp's really nervous, but he goes with him. They drive back to the inn. Jack has him park a little ways before you get there. He has him come around and stand under the window from where my room is. And the Invisible Man goes back up there. And while this is going on, a constable from London has been sent in to set these people straight about this ridiculous Invisible Man rumors they've been saying. And he's hosting a big meeting in the haberdashery in the tavern and hearing everybody's statements. And he thinks they're all Looney Tunes and it's clearly some shenanigans and fake. And Griffin's ego can't stand the idea that he's fake. So he starts wreaking havoc at this meeting.
And, hubris. It's vanity. It's my favorite sin.
And he murders the cop, too, once everybody flees. He then gets the books upstairs and tosses them out to Griffin, or out to Kemp, and they load the equipment in the car, and then they drive back to Kemp's place. And he's like, okay, now you need a good night's sleep. We're going to start our plans in the morning. And Kemp's really freaks out, so he sneaks into the other room and calls his colleague to tell him what's going on. And he's like, well, you have him under control. I trust you, and I'll be there in the morning. He's like, don't you understand what I've just told you? He's murdered somebody. He's a lunatic. He wants to take over the world. Why do you want to wait? And he's like, oh, I trust you to take care of it, Kemp. So he makes another phone call to his other colleague, figuring he'd be more reasonable. And, of course, when Flora finds out from her father that this call has been made, Dr. Cranley, that, oh, he's back. We must go see him kind of thing. So he tries to disguise the fact that he wasn't on the phone, and Griffin catches him in the other room. And he's like, oh, I just couldn't sleep, Griffin. It's okay. And he's like, well, you need a good night's sleep. But then they hear the car pulling up. He's like, you called the cops. You betrayed me. And it's like, no, it didn't. It's just Flora and her father. And Jack changes for the first time. And he's like he almost snaps out of it for a second. He's like, Flora. And he's like, "Oh, let her in. I have to see her." And Kemp runs downstairs to greet Flora and her dad. Her dad doesn't think it's a good idea for her to go up and talk to him after Kemp's been telling him how crazy the Invisible Man is, or how crazy Griffin is. And Kemp's like, "Don't worry, he changed completely when he told him about Flora." So Flora goes up there to talk to him. And he's kind of calmed down at first, and he apologizes. And she's like, "Why did you do this?" He's like, "Well, it was an experiment, and I wanted to bring the best for us, and be fame and fortune and all of that." And then he goes off into a delusional tirade about how they could sell it to a country that's the highest bidder, so they can have an army of invisible soldiers and take over the world and all this type of shit. And she's just kind of like, what? She's just like not gonna listen to any of this crap.
We can rule the galaxy like Invisible Man and wife.
Yeah. So then there's another disturbance, and he leaves, and they panic, and the cops are still trying to find the Invisible Man, and Kemp's like, "That's it, I have to tell the cops." So he does, and the cops come over, and they're talking about it, but Dr. Cranley still denies that it's Griffin. "Oh, I don't know who it is." And Kemp's like, "What do you mean you don't know who it is? There's no point in defending this. He's a total psycho." And to prove the point that he's a psycho, he derails a train, killing 100 people. And yet, for some reason, Dr. Cranley still doesn't want to rat out who he is to the police. Like, "Oh, we have to help him, Kemp." It's like, no, this guy's a mass murderer now. What? Because his delusions are getting ahead of him. And so they decide, and he threatens to kill Kemp at 10 o'clock the next night for the betrayal of the police. And Kemp jail. So Kemp runs to the cops. They agree to protect him. He disguises himself as a cop and takes a car up the country road, but of course the Invisible Man has been tailing him, and he ties him up and then maniacally leaves him in the back of the car and kicks the car off a cliff.
Right?
And it explodes and kills Kemp. And it's like, oh shit.
I wasn't expecting that.
The police are panicking, and they're asking people all over the country to submit ideas that you might have for how we could catch the Invisible Man, and everybody's giving weird ideas. And then eventually a winter storm comes, and they realize, well, the Invisible Man's going to have to seek shelter. And so they get a call from a farmer that, "Hey, I think he's sleeping in my barn." And they're like, "Well, we can't take any chances. It might be him." So they decide to, unfortunately for the farmer, to just set fire to his barn after surrounding it. And the Griffin is forced to come out, but his footprints betray his location in the snow, and he gets gunned down. He survives, gets taken to the hospital, and Flora is allowed to see him. And as he dies, he comes out of his insanity finally, and claims his love for her. And
everyone gets out of their insanity just before they're gonna die.
Yes, and as he dies, you have this neat special effect where you first start seeing his skeleton, and then his muscles, his skin, and then his face comes back. And you see, the only time you see Claude Rains is when he's lying dead in the hospital bed at the end of the film. Now, this movie has got a lot of humor in it, from all the stuff that happens at the haberdashery or at the tavern or whatever, with all the weirdos who are just always bugging him and won't leave him alone. The very eccentric barmaid there. And he's also very psychotic. And again, because he's the deadliest and because he's just a person who's like acting out on drugs, it seems scarier. And because this leans into the humor a lot more, I think it holds up a lot better. Like we mentioned when we watched Dracula, that's something we'd show to cinephile friends, but not something we would necessarily recommend to a modern audience.
Mm-hmm.
The Mummy, I think, was better. But this works because the horror, the escalation of of his psychopathy is so extreme. And the fact that for 1933, usually you don't have the bad guys get to do that many evil things before they're stopped. But no, he derails a train and murders 100 innocent people just because he's a maniac and wants to show people how powerful he is, because he has these delusions of grandeur. And I think that gives the character a bit more power. I mean, he's maddening, he's psychotic, he's deadly, but it also has a lot of humor and a lot of dark.
Hey, Wes Cagle.
And it doesn't waste time getting into the story. It's a short movie, only 70 minutes. And the effects are great.
I am so in love with these movies, except for what did we want? The Phantom of the Opera. Too long. But this movie, great.
And this one's
perfect time limit.
And this isn't a gothic romance either. This one isn't really gothic. It's kind of like for 1933, a modern set, or not modern. I guess it was sort of turn of the century, a bit, eerie story.
Well, big shout out to Bipolar Affinity. But no, it is sort of that turn of the century. It's like when does it take place? It feels like late 1800s, but it could be early 90s.
I think the book was 1898, around there, maybe.
Okay.
Because this is based on the H.G. Wells story, of course.
Yes.
And this is the only adaptation that is actually set in the same time period that the original story took place in. But they did cut out other things, like he would go to one night when he went insane. He just
bathhouses.
No, he went to some furniture.
The naked ladies, because that's what I would do if I
No, he went to some furniture store and just tossed everything around and ransacked the place, and went back home. And people were creeping out because they didn't know what was going on. He would go out every night, like on these weird intrusions or burglaries, just to ransack. Because he was just going.
And that's the thing. Is that being invisible does lend itself to being creepy.
Yeah.
It is a creep accelerant. So so Kat, if you were invisible, where would you go first?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Where should I go first? Well, part of the thing about being invisible is that you still have to travel like a great distance. So that's another thing. You'd have to drive a car, and people would be like, "Look, it's a ghost car."
Yeah, no, that'd be rad.
I don't know. Where would you go first?
Toys R Us.
Toys R Us, okay.
Yes. And I would just shoplift.
Shoplift. Maybe go check out the inside of Fort Knox or something.
But I know that the cliche. Yeah, I should probably go somewhere with more valuable stuff. But like everyone, like there is an inclination to perv out. I'd go into the girls' locker room. That's what I'd do.
Go check out.
No. What am I gonna do? Be invisible and masturbate in the corner? Fuck off.
Go check out Area 51, maybe.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Hangar 18.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of places of power that I cannot get into currently. But if I were invisible, I could get into the Oval Office.
Yeah, we could.
Hmm? We?
Yeah, who says?
You want to be my date to the in the Oval Office?
You wouldn't need a date. We'd be invisible, so we just sneak right in.
Right. So I wouldn't know you're there. You wouldn't know I'm there. And then we'd bump into each other arbitrarily and be like, hey, we're invisible.
Well, we'll just invent another part of the serum which allows us to see other invisible people.
That makes sense. I'm okay with this. Sunglasses.
So, here's the steelbook that I have.
Oh, fucking A.
That's
incredible. That's great.
Yeah, this is one of another one of the Alex Ross covers.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh, Finity is just saying something. I got distracted.
Oh, it's Arthur Kemp, not Paul Kemp. That's right. I was thinking of another character.
Paul Kemp is from The Rum Diary.
That's right. It's right. Arthur Kemp is this guy. I was surprised also when I first read the book that I think Kemp dies in the book. I can't remember. But in the movie, it's like I've forgotten the book because it had been so long since I read it. But I was surprised that Kemp does get killed because he was sort of set up as the good protagonist or co-protagonist. Like he's the guy you think has his moral compass in the right place. He's not worried about saving Griffin after all this insane, horrible things he's been doing. He's like, no, we need to put a stop to this right now. And yet he's the one who gets killed. So I thought that was kind of dark.
Well, yeah, but I also, again, like, I give lip service to Universal being sort of a trailblazer towards horror movies in the golden era of cinema, North American cinema. And I really admire how far this movie goes. Like, your bad guy, he's not redeemable. He's not charming. He had an aim, and he also went insane and murdered a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I like Claude Rains. And it's like, no. He murdered a lot of people.
Yeah, not here we don't.
Yeah.
And he's like almost like irritable the moment he shows up, even at the tavern. It's like,
oh, he's on edge the whole time.
Yeah. And it's like, maybe it wasn't a good idea for you to turn yourself invisible before you figured out how to bring yourself back. Maybe.
Yeah, but did he do that on purpose? Or was it an accident? I forget.
Well, I think he just says he did it because he was experimenting. He just didn't think that far ahead. That, it's going to be harder to come back. Like, it isn't explained why he thought it was a good idea to do that. But then again, he's not as smart as he thinks he is. He's like, like when Flora suggests to him, Jack, you could work with my father and he'll help you figure out the solution to this other great secret to bring you back. And he just gets really insulted at that suggestion. It's like, your father, he's such a buffoon and all that kind of stuff. And she just sits there and listens to him say all these horrible things. And she doesn't say anything in defense of her father. She just kind of,
but it's also, I think it's Jack's fatal flaw is that he doesn't, like, he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room all the time.
Yeah.
And when confronted with solutions to his affliction, he's like, no, I would have thought of that. And it's like, you didn't.
Yeah, and then there's silly things that happen, like when he goes into the bank and he takes the entire cash drawer, and there's all those people in there, and none of them seem to see the cash drawer floating in the air, and how he lifts up the barrier to walk out from behind the desk and carry the cash drawer out, and it's like, really? And then the other impracticalities, it's like, if you're stark naked, hiding under a little bit of hay in a barn in that winter storm, you're gonna freeze to death. In fact, if they're that close to winter, him running around invisible, naked throughout much of it would freeze his eye. He'd be done for. Like he says Kemp, I was hiding on the running board of your car the whole ride up here. It's like, really? You'd be an ice cube.
Well, and he does a lot of his work through blackmail. It's like, if you don't do what I say, I'm invisible. I will kill your loved ones.
That's where Kemp is like, well, I could see you right now sitting in the chair, so I could grab this fire poker.
Yeah. I know you're in the passenger seat. I could totally stab you in the chest.
Right.
I don't know. He didn't think of it.
Then you have other funny things, like when he steals the pair of trousers, I guess, from the clothesline, and that lady's running down the street screaming, and you see him running after her, just the trousers. And his maniacal laughter, and which Claude Rains is really good at this. I mean, I would love to have seen like behind the scenes footage of him actually film him doing all that stuff, because I never seen him that animated in any other film.
I think Claude Rains is such an incredible actor.
You see, that's the thing. This character,
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, this character of Jack Griffin is like a Looney Tunes character. He really is. But a murderous one. He and Judge Doom would get along pretty well in the Roger Rabbit movie.
But the thing is that he's invisible, and so when I think that if you are playing a person who is invisible, theatricality should be encouraged, because you don't have the benefit of, your physicality. Like, you're working off of your voice. And hopefully the special effects work.
Yeah. This movie did also lean into the humor more, because in the book it had more of a kind of a spooky atmosphere while he was at the town. Because again, he was sneaking out every night and doing this, but it was written kind of from Kemp's perspective. And so Kemp's trying to figure out what's going on and who's doing it, and other people are trying to figure out what it is, and they all know it has something to do with the mysterious guest. But whereas this one just leans into the absurdist humor with I think Una or Connor is her name, as Jenny Hall. She's the other lady from the tavern, the one who freaks out and screams all the time.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a question. I forget. Don't worry, I'll come back to it. But it is like, in terms of the building of tension, and a lot of this movie is the people reacting around the Invisible Man, and it is it's I'm gonna sound so stupid. It's tense.
Well, like you said, the supporting cast is pretty good in this film.
I'm gonna go to the book.
Like the
House of Horror.
I believe
it is published by Universal Studios. So what does it say about the Invisible Man? Ladies and gentlemen, here is where I do my thing, and I prove to you that I can read. I quote from this book.
Yeah, let me check here.
The Invisible Man, based on H.G. Wells' groundbreaking science fiction novella of the same name, is a film that amazes audiences, not only for making its title character actually appear to be invisible, but also for its suspense and intrigue. Oh, it's getting good.
Yeah, I can't get to the book. It's buried under all sorts of other massive books.
Oh, no, you're fine. I got it. I believe you have
the actual novel.
You have so much good stuff. I believe you have it.
It's a single volume that has 7 novels by H.G. Wells in it.
Well, that sounds like a bargain.
It is. It was.
Have you read them all?
Yes. I've had that book for 16 years now, I think.
See, I'm more of a hoarder. I buy things, but I never enjoy them. The book goes on to say a relative unknown, Claude Rains' performance as Jack Griffin, a scientist whose experiment goes terribly wrong, damning him to a life of invisibility. Damning? I guess it does. Anyway. He should do better stuff, though. Like, if you were invisible, would you do cool stuff?
Well, the reason he doesn't do cool stuff is like the doctor says, it involves this drug which makes you crazy.
He's got the madness. He's got the
something which Jack didn't know. And when Kemp tries to tell him hey, there's something about this drug that you didn't even know, he gets even more offended. Like, how dare you suggest I didn't know something, you know?
Ironically, while Rain's character is in nearly every frame of this film, he is invisible for almost all of his screen time. It was through his voice that he was convincingly portrayed as a character lost, alone, and slowly going mad. I agree. You were complaining about Claude Rains last time we talked, and you didn't like how they made the Phantom of the Opera into a sympathetic character. But I think that sort of pathos helps the audience get into the story, And I think that that occurs here very specifically.
I didn't feel there was much pathos with this Invisible Man. I mean, he's just, because it's not so much that he slowly goes mad. He's already kind of really agitated the minute he arrives and turns to violence pretty quickly.
Sure. But it's not like he went out of his way to be evil. He went out of his way to be invisible. And it is only through finding out that his life work not only destroyed him. Actually, that's the only thing it really destroyed was him. I want to be invisible. Okay, you can be invisible. This is terrible. Can I stop being invisible? And the answer is no. When you are so preoccupied with becoming invisible, sometimes you forget that you have to find a way out of it after you succeed. It's really a story about the crushing weight of success.
That could also be it. He may have just been arrogant enough to think that he was going to be able to figure a way out of it, which is why he probably turned himself invisible without thinking about how to get back first.
Maybe a bank. But I worked at a bank, and it's not easy to steal things. Even if I were invisible, it would take a lot of work.
Well, that's the thing. All the stuff he talks about being invisible wouldn't help because, well, everybody's going to see, like, say, the money or the bars of gold floating through the air. It's like, how it doesn't really work the way he thinks it does.
Now, I don't want to ask for a rating, but I do want to talk about some adaptations.
Okay.
Have you ever seen Memoirs of an Invisible Man with Chevy Chase?
No.
Oh, I enjoy it. I believe that Roger Ebert gave it a thumbs down. Have you ever seen Hollow Man?
I have, yes.
And did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I liked it.
I've never seen it.
It was another interesting spin where Kevin Bacon volunteers himself as the test subject for this invisibility drug, which again, I can't remember what the logic was. I think it was a military research center or something because they're underground, and something goes wrong and they can't figure out how to bring him back, and the other scientists think it's a good idea for him to stay in the facility and not go home while they all get to go back up to the surface and back to their lives. And much like with the original Invisible Man, where it makes you the serum also makes you crazy, combined with the fact that he's locked in this subterranean complex the entire time, exacerbates his villainy and insanity to the point where he starts doing evil things to the other workers and breaking out to go and do other horrible things. And he was played by Kevin Bacon. I thought he did a pretty good job. And you had Josh Brolin, I guess, is the substitute Kemp character, as the other scientist, and Elizabeth Shue as I guess they used to have the Kevin Bacon character used to have a thing, but now she's with the Josh Brolin character, and he doesn't like that. Kevin Bacon's like really jealous about it. So there's stuff going on there, and it has a more of a thriller type vibe to it. But I liked it.
Well, but in comparison to the original, like when we're looking at Claude Rains, it's
night and day difference in terms of how they play the character.
Well, and no, not in terms of the character, but in terms of the tone of the movie, where in Hollow Man, they're flaunting it. We've done this. We have to do this. But when in the original, it's, I have figured this out. And it is mine, I tell you. And so there is no team. There's no financial reward. It's just a mad scientist doing mad science for science sake. But in the first one,
yeah. Well, in the second one, in Hollow Man, it's trying to have more of a thriller horror vibe with a lot of, viciousness. It doesn't have as much humor in it.
Sure.
Whereas, again, this Invisible Man leans into the humor, but the psychosis a lot, which is why it's, I guess, surprising when you see just how evil Claude Rains' Invisible Man gets.
And you've never seen Memoirs of an Invisible Man?
No, I heard that a lot of people didn't like it, though. Like a lot of
I
critics.
saw it. I've seen it twice, and I like it.
Eh.
But I like Chevy Chase, and John Carpenter, so it's worth it. I wish I had the physical. I don't have the Blu-ray or the DVD. I wish I did. It's out of print and difficult to attain. But did you see the Peggy Olson?
Who's Peggy Olson?
Elizabeth Moss. Sorry.
I did.
Do you have a fucking steelbook for this shit?
No, 4K.
Oh my god!
This is a very good movie, built on tension and suspense rather than blood, guts, and gore and all that crap.
Huh?
Kind of like a good old-fashioned horror film set in the modern era, where she's basically, her husband or whatever has died, and she's suddenly being haunted by this invisible man, and she is convinced that her husband must still be alive and is going after her, and it might have something to do with the will, that, or not the will, but like the nuptial agreement or something like that that she thinks he's trying to get around, because it has some clause in there that says, like, oh, in the event of death or whatever, if I could prove that you're insane, then you're not entitled to anything. And so she thinks that he's faked his death and is like, gaslighting her as the invisible man to get around having to pay her, because if he were to just divorce her straight up, he'd have to, because he's super rich and have to give her all his money. And that's what she thinks is going on. But of course, everybody else thinks she's crazy. And you just see, so the movie's told from her perspective instead of the invisible man. Like, the invisible man is truly an invisible man, and that he's not really a character in the film. It's just you're following her as she's being like terrified and stalked by this invisible man.
Yes, it's in your head.
Very good movie, though. I was very surprised, particularly since it was Lee Whannell directing. I didn't have high hopes for it originally, but I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. It was very good.
So, is it on the recommend?
Oh, definitely.
Huh. I'll have to write it down. I hate it when I have to write things down. I only have a pencil. My pen broke. Invisible Man.
That's from the year 2020.
No, I'm just going to put Peggy.
Released February 2020. So that's been a while. Who is Peggy Olson, though?
Peggy Olson is Elizabeth Moss's character in Mad Men. And Mad Men is in my top 3 television shows of all time.
I remember seeing promos for that when it first opened. I was going to watch the pilot episode when it first aired, but high school and things were in the way, so I missed it.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. It's actually superfluous information. I apologize. But I think, like, this is such an achievement in suspense. Although, you know what? Like, Universal does rely on turn of the century, but how could you not, considering that the turn of the century was only 30 years before? Like, there is so much gothic, there is so much gaslight. As we've been discussing throughout all of these Universal monster movies, I am putting myself in the seats of people who paid a nickel to see this. And I think the special effects are incredible. And I think that the characterization, I don't want to say performance, because, Claude Rains is invisible, but his characterization is great. And maybe his performance is fantastic because he does sort of pantomime all over the place. He flails whenever he has the opportunity.
Yeah. I just checked, and the story was written in 1897.
Oh, that's my birthday.
And I don't know how much the English countryside like that would have changed by 1933. Maybe a lot.
No, 30 years? No, not much. Well, no.
Well, it's still set at the turn of the century, sort of, I guess. So, and then there were apparently other, I think there were spin-offs or sequels to this. I don't remember exactly. There might have been.
Did they bump into Abbott and Costello?
At some point, yeah. And Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. In let's see where. Let's see, Legacy.
He's such a difficult, no matter what you name him. Like the Invisible Man is such a difficult character to sort of present as a threat.
Okay.
And it sounds like the Peggy Olson one is.
He was in six further American films. There was The Invisible Man Returns in 1940 with Vincent Price as the Invisible Man in that film. There was
his voice.
There was the Invisible Woman, and he might have been a physical. Who knows? There was the Invisible Woman, also from 1940, but that was a comedy with Virginia Bruce as the Invisible Woman and John Barrymore as a scientist who invents the serum. There was in 1942 Invisible Agent with John Hall playing Griffin's grandson, with Peter Lorre and Sir Hedrick Hardwicke as Axis power agents.
I will watch anything with Peter Lorre.
In 1944, you have The Invisible Man's Revenge, also starring John Hall, but as a different Invisible Man, so a different continuity. And then, yes, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. With Vincent Price providing the voice of the Invisible Man. And then he shows up again with Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man in 1951 with Arthur Francis, Tommy Nelson, a boxer framed for murder who takes the invisibility formula to find the real killer and clear his name. Then there was a Japanese film called The Invisible Man Appears in 1949, a U.S. serial called The Invisible Monster from 1950, The Invisible Avenger from 54, another Japanese movie, another Japanese one, The Invisible Man versus the Human Fly in 1957.
I want to see that.
The Invisible Boy, also from 1957, starring Richard Eyre.
Don't want to see that.
A French film from 1970, doesn't have any links for it.
L'Enfant.
The Amazing Transparent Man, which is a 1960 sci-fi crime thriller about an invisible safecracker. Mad Monster Party from 1967 includes the Invisible Man voiced by Alan Swift as part of the Monster Ensemble. Sabash Satayam, a Telugu film from 1969. Amazon Women of the Moon from 1987 features a spoof titled Son of the Invisible Man, with Ed Begley Jr. playing the son of the original Invisible Man, who believes he is invisible, but is in fact visible.
I have Amazon Women on the Moon. I should rewatch it.
But he believes he is invisible, even though he's not, leading to an awkward situation when he disrobes in front of everybody.
Right, I remember. Yeah.
The Invisible Kid from 1988. Then you have Memoirs of an Invisible Man, you mentioned, from 1992. Hollow Man, an Italian adaptation in 2014. And then the 2020 version. And apparently a sequel to the 2020 version with Elizabeth Banks is going to be called The Invisible Woman. So
I would give anything to see Elizabeth Banks invisible.
18, 19, 20, 22. So that's 23 films. And then there's a bunch of TV series as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8 TV series. So, yeah, this has been adapted a lot. And I'm sure all the adaptations vary wildly in terms of plot and story.
The Dead Man in the chat. Hey, Dead Man. Thank you for being here. I recently watched The Invisible Man original and Memoirs of an Invisible Man, and of the two, I think Invisible Man is so much better. I agree. No, I was such a huge fan of the it's been a long day, of the Chevy Chase Memoirs of an Invisible Man, directed by John Carpenter. I love it. The antagonist is Sam Neill. He's the villain of the piece. And I really, really like it. And as I mentioned, when I first got the box set, I was like, I love Claude Rains. I love Memoirs of an Invisible Man. I'm gonna check out the original. And this movie, I'm giving it a 9 because I think even for modern audiences, I think that it is kitschy enough. It gets you with its old timiness, but it certainly it's starkly harsh.
There was something else pretty funny here that I found about the scientific accuracy of the Invisible Man.
Okay.
Apparently, a Russian writer pointed out that from a scientific point of view, a man made invisible by Griffin's method should have been blind because a human eye works by absorbing incoming light, not letting it through completely. H.G. Wells seems to show some awareness of this problem in Chapter 20, where the eyes of an otherwise invisible cat retain visible retinas. Nonetheless, this would be insufficient because the retina would be flooded with light from all directions that ordinarily is blocked by the opaque sclera of the eyeball. Also, any image would be badly blurred if the eye had an invisible cornea and lens.
When was that written?
1962 in a book called Physics Can Be Fun by Yakov I. Perelman.
Well, it sounds like there have always been critics of art who are like, that wouldn't work that way.
Well, he must have written it at least 20 years before, because he died in 1942, but this book didn't come out till 62. So
yeah, well, no, you know what? I'm glad he's dead.
So I'm gonna. How much should I rate this movie? I think I give this like a 9. You jump right into the story. It's breezy. It's got a good runtime. Again, the surprise that they kill off the Kemp character, the fact that it gets knocked a little bit because the Flora character is kind of pointless, just kind of there, and the ending, I admit, comes up kind of suddenly. Thought it was going to be a bit more dramatic, but that's all right. I still think this is a great movie.
Yeah, but this is any movie that is made before 1940, as soon as you have dispatched the enemy, they just say, all right, it's over, go home. Like, the same thing happened to Dracula. It was like, oh, we killed him, bye.
No, I meant that the showdown ends up being he's sleeping in a barn, and then his cat on him in the snow,
and we'll light it on fire. It'll work. Although the special effects is good, I like seeing his footprints in fire. Like, we can't. So anyway, the Invisible Man dies, and spoilers. But if you are a fan of sort of classic cinema, or you want to see something that is representative of the ingenuity of special effects back before, in the way before, this is super. Like, it's incredible what they do.
Yeah.
And it never really, like, aside from the age it never really falls apart. Like, you never point and laugh and say, oh, look at those. You're more like you're pointing and being like, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe it's not an invisible man. So I think they do a great job. The movie making is incredible. The suspense is incredible. The performances are incredible.
And I should mention, it was also directed by James Whale, who also directed 2 other films we've yet to cover in this series. So
Yeah.
I'm surprised that this one is very good, considering that those other 2 are also extremely good.
Yeah. Oh, and also, now that you bring up James Whale, we are not affiliated with the channel. But if you like the history of cinema from the voices of people who made that cinema, I would recommend subscribing to a YouTube channel called The James Whale Bake Sale. He does incredible work. And in terms of compiling your favorite filmmakers talking about influential films, they're like a minute, 2 minutes long, sometimes 8 minutes, but not often. But yeah,
And
I'm looking forward to seeing the cinematographic history of James Whale.
And speaking of James Whale, there was a good movie that Ian McKellen played him in called Gods and Monsters from 1998 that I
He
recommend.
plays James Whale?
Yes, Ian McKellen plays James Whale. The story is about it's 1957, and his heyday as the director of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Invisible Man is long behind him. Retired and semi-reclusive, he lives his days accompanied only by images of his past. When his dour housekeeper Hannah hires a handsome young gardener, played by Brendan Fraser, the flamboyant director and simple yardman develop an unlikely friendship. That's a good movie.
Does it say that there's butt sex?
No. Why? That's your first thing that you go to all the fucking time.
It's why I'm single.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Dead Man in the chat says, and by the way, thank you for being here, the Dead Man.
Yes.
I like the mad scientist aspect better than the weird accident. Me too. But it's the madness. It's the madness that is conveyed almost with a theatrical pantomime performance that I really, really appreciate. The use of miniatures was good with the train. Yep.
Oh, excellent.
Special effects. The special effects were rad throughout this.
Yes. And with the car going over the cliff and it catches fire and bam and all that.
So how many weeks until Halloween?
3 weeks.
3.
And we have 4 more films to cover in this series.
I know you didn't want to cover Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein at the same time.
Well, they are 2 very distinctly different movies that have a lot to say about both of them. They're very good films.
All right. Well, so we're not going to do those as a double feature.
I mean, I think it'd be better to do them as 2 separate ones because there's a lot to say about both, I thought.
Okay. All right. So next week,
we also still have the Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yes. So what do you want to? Which one of those do you want?
We could either go with Frankenstein, which I think is going to be the cream of the crop, or we could build up to that. Do like maybe the Wolfman.
I feel like Frankenstein is something that we should build up to until like it should be the season finale.
So review the sequel before the prequel.
Yes.
All right. Well, then we could do the Wolfman next week.
I like this plan.
Yes. Thanks you to the chat. You're all.
Oh yeah, no. If you guys have an idea, which one would you like us to watch? All 3 of you. Actually, 2 of you. I'm one of them. So.
Oh, well, I see. Thanks to Finity and the Dead Man and Jill and Ash for showing up.
Yeah. It's always nice to have people listen to us talk. But also, like Kat, it's so the thing that I feel grateful for is that I got this because I was being a completionist. I wanted it because I was like, oh well, someday I'll talk about the Universal Monster movies with somebody if somebody likes me. And the thing is that you do. You like me. And so I am so grateful that we get to talk about these movies. And it is my first interaction. And so for you and for everyone who's hanging out, you guys are rad because you're making me watch this shit.
I also do like that with this one in particular that he's like the most human monster. Like he's not, he's not. There's nothing really. I mean, it's like a science fiction as opposed to supernatural.
Yeah.
And that's
no, he's a mad scientist gone wrong.
Yeah, it's like a precursor to more modern type horrors like Psycho and things like that. Because this guy definitely is a psycho. But so that's, I think, what sets this film apart from the other films in the series. So yeah, a very good film.
Well.
Oh, and the dead man chimes back in and he says, Frankenstein should be the last one before Halloween. Yes.
I agree. I agree with the dead man.
Yes.
Not a phrase I was expecting to say today.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this is, I don't know. Kat, do you have anything else you want to say about the Invisible Man?
Not really.
I would rather not. No, but I think that we talked earlier about, like earlier in this series, about the legacy of these characters. And I think that the Invisible Man is menacing, but I think that he is on the periphery. And so I do enjoy. It's the only one of these movies that I've seen twice. And so,
really?
Yeah.
What's the other one?
I love Claude Rains.
Oh, the only one. Okay. Yeah, it's.
And it was so funny because I love Claude Rains and he was in The Invisible Man and I didn't get to see him at all.
At the very end, he did.
I know, but it was like 5 seconds. And the dead man says, that's what I liked about the ending because it's a morality tale. He agrees that this is something that is unnatural, that shouldn't be messed with. Yeah. Like he gets confronted by his own madness and he understands that he was mad. And I do like that. Anyway, can we go?
Yeah. Thanks to the chat.
Wait, did you want to thank the chat?
I just said yeah, thanks to the chat. The Dead Man and Finity and West Cagle. Sorry, West Cagle was here. Ash and Jill.
Who's Jill?
Very funny.
I know, I am very funny. She would think it's funny. So we're good?
Yep.
All right. Oh, I'm supposed to click the end stream.